This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The crucial midterm exam is here. Now we find out how good are these Wolverines. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Ron Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And yes, that grueling stretch of games we've been talking about for the last 9 months is finally here. Over the next 4 weeks, Michigan will play 3 games here at the midway point of the 2018 campaign that will determine for us, are we a talented team or are we a good one? And now I think we get some answers. And here's why this is crucial and why I'm calling it a midterm, even though I know it's a cliche. You know, if you flunk the midterm, you still have the final to go. You know, for Michigan, the final is always Ohio State, right? But the grade you've got to get on that final now becomes so difficult to acquire that it really renders the final exam even more of an existential quest than you would prefer it to be. And that's why you don't want to flunk that midterm. And these next 3 games for Michigan are that midterm. The goal for this team, given how last season ended and the schedule yet to play, I saw one analysis, I retweeted it earlier today at Michigan Podcast, that has Michigan's second half schedule the most difficult in the country. Well, the goal looking at that schedule with several of those games on the road was to have a chance going into Columbus at the end of the year in the final game to play for that elusive division title. Michigan still hasn't played in Indy. In fact, Michigan is under its second longest title drought in the history of the program. And so in order to get there, in order for Michigan to know for sure that that game against Ohio State in Columbus at the end of the year will have championship implications, not just for the Buckeyes, but for the good guys as well, the Wolverines have to go at least 2-1 in this stretch. And it begins against the Badgers of Wisconsin under the lights, prime time at the Big House. Now, Wisconsin has not been an underdog by more than 7 points in a Big Ten game, has not lost a Big Ten game by more than 7 points in its last 33 Big Ten road games. That's right, 33 Big Ten road games in a row. They have not lost by 7 points or more, and you know what? They're a 7.5-point underdog against our beloved Maize and Blue on Saturday night. Now, you'll recall, you go back to the season opener against Notre Dame, I thought we were going to win because I think we're a better team, but we've had ambushes. We've never won a night game in South Bend. It's Shea Patterson's first game. I thought we were going to have to make it ugly to win it, that the offense would be really sluggish with all these moving parts, with a new quarterback on the road in that environment. And as we got closer to kickoff of that game, I don't know about you, I started having that sinking feeling, And then, of course, we saw the first quarter, and it was justified. This week, I've got a whole different perspective. I can't wait for the game to get here. I think we're ready. I think we're ready to make a statement. I think we're ready for a statement win. And you got to love the way it's just almost cosmic, the way that this is turning out now with game day and prime time and national TV. And the whole bugaboo for Michigan has been what? Harbaugh's great at bullying the teams that we clearly have better personnel than. But when we go up against the good teams, in those primetime events, we can't get it done. But I look at the way this team has played the last 5 weeks, and I know it's not great competition. It's not terrible either. Michigan's strength of schedule at Sagarin right now is 43rd, which for the first half of the season is not bad at all. And I like the way we've played. We've won games with dominant rushing performances. We've won games where Shea Patterson looked like the guy that was the former 5-star quarterback. We had the game where we had to come back against Northwestern and think about how down we were about that last week. And all of a sudden, Northwestern goes into East Lansing and beats Sparty by double digits. And that win in Evanston doesn't look nearly as bad now, does it? So we've had to win these last 5 games, closing out games, coming back, dominant performances on one side of the ball. The defense, of course, has been the constant. It's now the number 1 total defense in the country. If you look at, the little quizzes you take before the midterm to kind of assess where you're at, are you getting the material? Are you growing in the class? I think we have passed those quizzes. Not always with an A, but with at least a good grade. And I think we're ready for this test on Saturday night. And what I like about the matchup against Wisconsin, it's essentially our team, but that doesn't recruit as well. And this time now, we have the real quarterback that we didn't have for that matchup in November last year when we were up 10-0 and we're leading well into the second half, in fact. So the way that that's setting up, it's almost like a harmonic convergence where things are going full circle now, and it's setting up for Michigan to make a statement with the nation watching on Saturday night. And I think we will. I want to say thank you. We've landed several new Patreon supporters at Michigan Podcast since the season started. Thank you to those of you that are supporting us. And if you would like to, we want you to know that you get some exclusive content that we provide for you each week via Patreon, including my instant reaction post-game podcast, my picks for the Michigan game, pre-kickoff, and more. As a thank you to those of you that decide that you like what we do here at Michigan Podcast enough to support us at Patreon. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Back here on Michigan Podcast and joined by my partner over at Wolverine Digest, and he is the mid-morning host at WTKA Ann Arbor as well, Michael Spath. Good to see you, Michael. Go Blue. How are you?
I'm feeling great, man. Feeling great. Cannot wait for these next couple of weeks.
I got to tell you, and this was what I opened up the show with, I thought we were a better team than Notre Dame. And I predicted us to win that game. But as it grew closer, and the night game, the atmosphere there, we've been ambushed so many times in that rivalry game, in that atmosphere. I started having that sinking feeling I had when we got close to the Outback Bowl and all these other Big Ten teams were winning, and you just knew it was setting up for Michigan to be the one team to lose, right?
Yeah.
I have the total opposite feeling right now. There's this is like almost cosmic. Game day there, prime time. You get all these proverbial monkeys off your back with everybody watching. You change a lot of these narratives. I'm even looking at subtle things, like when I saw the opening line was 6.5 and the early sharp bettors bet that thing up to 7.5 or 8. And you just get the sense this is a team eager to make a statement. And there's not a pressure there as much as an eagerness, but you're on the ground there in Ann Arbor. What are you sensing this week?
No, I completely agree with you. And since you mentioned this chance to make a statement, I mean, you think about it, their first chance to make a statement was Notre Dame game. They came out flat. their second chance to make a statement was probably the Northwestern game because it's on the road and all the talk about they're not very good on the road. And they came out flat, and then they ended up making a statement later on in the game. Maryland, there wasn't a lot of excitement about. Maybe a little bit with Nebraska, just because Nebraska with the Scott Frost talk. And look what the statement that Michigan made with all that conversation about Scott Frost. They came out and just pummeled the Cornhuskers. And so this is really, as you said, I think everybody on Michigan knows what type of opportunity they have these next 2 weeks. Playing Wisconsin under the lights, college game day being in town, and then a week later going on the road to play Michigan State in a game where you've got a score to settle. You've got 2 scores to settle with Michigan State. And frankly, if you've been paying attention for the last 10 years, we've got about 7 or 8 scores to settle with the Spartans. And this could be one of those seasons. And so, from everything I've heard from players, from coaches, from fans this week, there's big time excitement about what these 2 weeks present for Michigan. And that's why I agree with you that I think we're going to see Michigan's best football, besides the fact that I think they're better football teams than the 2 opponents that they're going to have these next 2 games. And, I don't want to go as far as I think they're going to pound Wisconsin and pound Michigan State, but I do think they're going to cover the spread. And I think they're going to win this game against the Badgers by more than 10 points.
When you look at the game against Wisconsin, is it as simple as without the gaping hole at quarterback that we had last year, in many respects, Wisconsin is a developmental version of Jim Harbaugh's program, meaning that it's virtually the same program, but Michigan is just recruiting at a different level. Is it just that simple?
I don't know if it's that simple, because I do think that when you look at the offensive philosophy, I do think that Michigan is going to be a little bit different overall. I do think that they're a little more open to some of the spread concepts and running read option. I mean, they're not running Alex Hornibrook in read option right now. But yeah, they want to start with a dominant running game. They want to start with 5 hog mollies up front that are just running over people, and then having a great running back that sets up everything else. And they want to have a quarterback. That's my one thing is I think Wisconsin still wants to have a quarterback kind of like they've always had, where he doesn't make big mistakes. When he needs to make a big play, he can, which Alex Hornibrook has done. I think Michigan's going to be a little bit different. I think Michigan is really going to try to set their quarterback loose as they go forward here. We've seen it some with Shea Patterson this year. We've seen it a little bit with Dylan McCaffrey this year. And so I really think that there's a largely similar, probably like maybe 3/4 similar, but that 1 quarter that is going to be a little bit different between Michigan and Wisconsin. And I like that, because if they were just running the same type of offense that Wisconsin runs, I don't know if they would be able to attract the type of elite talent on the outside, the elite talent at quarterback that I think Michigan has a chance to bring in year after year. Because let's face it, even though they've had some good quarterbacks, even though they've had some good wide receivers, Wisconsin's a running back, offensive line, and tight end team. Those are the players that they produce, and those are the players that they churn out for the NFL. They don't churn out much more than that. And if you want to have those great players, you want to be a really dynamic offense, I think you have to have great wide receivers and a quarterback too.
Here's a stat I just saw. In their last 33 Big Ten road games, Wisconsin has not lost a single one of those games by more than 7 points. And yet the spread on Saturday night right now, as you and I are recording this on Tuesday afternoon, is 7.5. Now, you know who knows numbers like that? Odds makers do. They know numbers like that, So what do you think? Do you think that what does that trend tell you about this game? Or maybe it tells you nothing?
I think it tells me, usually Vegas is pretty, when they're deciding between teams like this that are, both ranked in the top 10 or right thereabouts, that seemingly have similar caliber, offenses. I think when they are favoring one team by 7.5 or more, it's because they really truly feel like there is a one team at an advantage, or there's a bigger discrepancy between these two teams than maybe we're looking at it when we're looking at the on paper. I would expect, honestly, that's where I keep on coming back is if you look at what Michigan's trying to do offensively this year, they're trying to run the football, maybe with a little bit of stubbornness, but they're trying to run the football to a point where they can set up the play action. And Wisconsin, as good as they've been the last couple of years against the run, with one of the better front sevens you'll see in college football consistently, they're not very good against it this year. And not only are they not very good against it this year, but they've played pretty much scrub teams when it comes to teams with good rushing
Number
offense.
73 schedule so far, according to Sagarin. And Wisconsin is 55th in defensive or rush defense efficiency, according to SB Nation's Bill Connolly's analytic numbers. That's not Wisconsin-like at all.
No, I mean, they're giving up, 140 yards on the ground per game. They're giving up more than 4.4 yards per carry per game. And I looked it up at the teams that they're going against. BYU, New Mexico State, Western Kentucky, and Nebraska all rank in like the bottom 30 teams in college football in terms of rushing. So it's not like they're giving up big yardage against, Ohio State and against Air Force and Navy that are putting up, 350 yards rushing per game. They're giving up those big numbers against bad rushing offenses. And I'm starting to buy in a little bit into this Michigan offensive line. This is a good rushing attack. And I saw a lot against Maryland, which was one of the better rush defenses in the country. I saw some really good things from Michigan's offensive line in that game. Opening up holes, I think Karan Higdon missed a couple opportunities where we probably would have seen Michigan go over 200, 250 yards rushing if he hit a couple of those holes that were there. I really like what we're seeing on the Michigan offensive line right now.
So, Michael, one of the big storylines from our perspective, of course, is the injury situation. What's the scuttlebutt on the ground there in Ann Arbor? Let's start with Rashawn Gary. The assumption is he was just held out precautionary because of the next two games. You buying into that conventional wisdom?
Yeah, I 100% do. I mean, the fact that Jim Harbaugh said, we are just being cautious with them. I expect Rashawn Gary to play, especially expect him to play against Michigan State after we saw how much that game tore him up inside a year ago. So I expect him to be back this week against Wisconsin. I expect Carlo Kemp to be in there against Wisconsin. And then I think there's a decent chance that we'll see Michael Dwumfor on Saturday. I know that Jim Harbaugh didn't big-time specifics about that, but I think there's a chance that we see him. Aubrey Solomon's getting closer. At the very least, Gary and Kemp will both be in there on Saturday. Anything after that is probably a little bit of a cherry on top. But I'd love to have one of those other guys in there. I will say this. I've been asked a couple of times if Michigan switches to a 3-4 defense this week with some of the injuries they've had inside. And no. I mean, why would you switch to a 3-4 defense to put an extra linebacker on the field against this Wisconsin rushing attack? You just don't do that. I think they'll stick with a 4-3. I think you'll see more of Lawrence Marshall, Carlo Kemp. You'll see a lot of Brian Monet, Donovan Jeter, and don't be surprised if you see if they're in a tight situation. Don't be surprised if you see a little bit of Rashawn Gary inside this weekend.
If I would have told you halfway through the season that Michigan would have to play meaningful action and meaningful games this year, and we had this conversation like in August, and I'd have told you they were going to have to play meaningful games this year without Rashawn Gary, Chris Evans, Aubrey Solomon, and Tariq Black. Those are probably four of the top 10 or 12 guys we would have had rated on this team coming into the year. And they've played large stretches of this season without three of those guys. They just played a full game without another one of those guys, and the three other guys as well. Dwumfor got hurt in the first half. He's really been an emerging force the last few weeks. I mean, the depth that this team has shown has been really impressive so far.
Well, and not only has it been impressive, but they've only used three true freshmen every single week. We've seen Aiden Hutchinson, we've seen Ronnie Bell, and we've seen kickoff specialist Jake Moody. So they really haven't used an entire class in some of those reserve roles. And so this is mostly the 2016, 2017, and a little bit of the 2015 class. It just goes to show you how strong those 2016 and 2017 classes. Mm-hmm. It also goes to show you this, Steve, which I know you know this very well from you writing a great article for Wolverine Digest about what a roster might look like. And people have shown a little bit of chagrin the last couple of years. Jim Harbaugh came in and he immediately signed. Oversigned. He had, 28 players in one class and I think 27 players in the other class. And people were like, well, is this the way that Michigan does things? Well, when you look at it, I mean, the numbers have always worked out for Michigan. They've always had 85 guys on scholarship or under that. They've never been in a position where they had to run somebody off and just kick them off the team, which if they ever did that, you and I would be the first to call them out about it. But having those gigantic classes in 2016 and 17, having more than 50 players in those two classes has been instrumental to withstanding some of the injuries that they've had this particular season. And so it's a credit to the way that they've been able to recruit. I think when you look at the 2019 class, there's a lot to get excited about too. And really this 2018 class, Hutchinson and, as we mentioned, Ronnie Bell. And Ronnie Bell,
you knew Ronnie Bell was going to be a player after the way the Michigan internet community destroyed them for taking a kid who had no scholarship offers at the time. K-State came in late when they saw us offer him. Okay, you knew though. You just knew when you started seeing the highlight videos of his hops in basketball and those. You just knew this was going to be a kid that slipped through the cracks and was going to be a player. That's always how this works out. You've covered recruiting for years. How many times has it happened this way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many examples of it. And we were talking about Mike Hart and Braylon Edwards earlier this week, a couple of 3-stars. I tell you the moment that I know he's only had about 4 catches this year, but the catch that he made against Nebraska from Dylan McCaffrey, catching him with his fingertips, not like his, catching it into his body, his fingertips out here, a ball that's like kind of going away from him a little bit, and he catches it, and then he makes the great move at like the 15-yard line to deke that guy and score the touchdown. I thought, oh my God. Like, this kid is going to be really something special when he gets more opportunity. And guess what? He's been getting more and more opportunity. Had the touchdown reception against Maryland last week, a key play. Got an end around, had another catch. We kind of talked about on our show on Tuesday, Aiden Hutchinson is the first half freshman of the year for Michigan. But I bet you that Ronnie Bell is the second half freshman of the year for the Wolverines.
What has you concerned then? All of us thought we were going to win at Notre Dame, but we had legit concerns. Shea Patterson's first game, Michigan on the road at night. We've seen Michigan teams go in there when Lou Holtz is coaching his first game, and it's Harbaugh's senior year, and Michigan's preseason number 1 or 2 in the country, and they need a shanked field goal to hold on. We had plenty of reasons to be worried, even though we were confident, but we had legit worries. What are you legit worried here about Michigan's next attempt on Saturday night to make a statement game? What concerns you?
Honestly, I only have 2 concerns with this Michigan football team after what I've seen the first 6 games. And they're concerns that we came into the year with, and they're concerns that, let's face it, as fans, it's a little bit of like that, 10 years of futility along the offensive line. It's a little bit of that 1-6 record against rivals and the 0-16, or I think it's now an 0-17 mark on the road against ranked opponents, where those things, until they get completely beaten down by Michigan, those are going to be the ones that affect us and impact us, because it's been 10 years of having to suffer through the same maladies that have made us feel that way. So for me, playing Wisconsin on Saturday, my concern is this offensive line legit? I think they are. I think with Ed Warner, I think the way they've been improving week to week, that they can run block and that they can pass block. But until they go out there and play against a team like Wisconsin, even with what we said about their issues up front or issues in the front 7 against the run, this is still a defense that's going to have some NFL players on it. And so until they go out there and do that with the running game and do that with the offensive line, I'm going to have that concern. And until they go on the road and beat a team like Michigan State, I'm going to have a concern that they're going to start slow, that their defense is going to be out of sorts, and that they're not going to find a way to win those games. And so those 2 things, those 2 stereotypes, those 2 narratives can get absolutely blown out of the water the next 2 games. And that's what I'm hoping happens. But if you're going to ask me, I'm going to say, as a fan that's been covering this team for a decade, those are my concerns. And until I see it happen, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical.
It's funny, too, because I share your concerns. And, I'm a little older than you, but you're old enough to remember probably the latter Bo era. And, I remember growing up, my early years as a Michigan fan, how often we would start slow in first half of games. And you went into halftime confident because of Bo's legendary halftime adjustments, and you would dominate the third quarter. And it's funny, when you're winning 13 Big Ten championships in 21 years, your team's not starting slow. They're just waiting to make their halftime adjustments. When you don't win a Big Ten championship in 13 years, your team is starting slow. You know what I'm saying? Changes the whole perception of things. And if you look at the way we've lost a lot of these games, drop punt snaps, drop touchdowns and first downs against Iowa. I don't think Jordan Lewis got beat man-to-man for a touchdown in 4 years at Michigan until his last play in man-to-man coverage against Florida State in the Orange Bowl, right? We have just found ways to lose these games, and it does seem like it's almost cosmically aligning right now, Michael, for a lot of demons to get exercised with the nation watching on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love for that to happen. If Michigan goes out there, runs the football for 200 yards against Wisconsin, then I'm going to feel so much better about going to that game against Michigan State, because to me, that'll say, hey, look, I know Michigan State's a better rush defense, but this is a team that's starting to figure it out and it's going to put it together. And so, man, it's an exciting time to be a Michigan fan. It's a little bit of a dangerous time to be a Michigan fan because we've got our hopes up again. Our expectations are sky high for these next two games, and Michigan's going to go out there and win. I don't care if they win by 1 point. Just go out there and win these games, because they're very beatable opponents, both of them, especially Michigan State. And then go into the bye, and if you go into the bye and you're 7-1 and you're you've got 5 wins in the Big Ten, and you've got 4 games left on your schedule, and you can essentially control your own destiny, because even if you were to lose the game against Penn State, you're playing Columbus. You're in Columbus. You're playing Ohio State for a chance to win the division and play in the Big Ten championship game. And that's all that we really wanted coming into this year. We want to beat our rivals. We haven't beaten one of them yet. We want to beat Michigan State, take care of business, beat Wisconsin, go into November with everything on the line, probably ranked in the top 8 in the country. How much fun would that be? Mm-hmm. So I'm super excited about it, and I'll be honest, a little bit nervous about it.
Michael Spath, WTKA, good to see you, brother. Thanks for joining us this week on Michigan Podcast.
All right, thanks a lot, Steve.
Take care. If you want to keep up with what we think about the Wolverines all week long, aside from when we're doing this for Michigan Podcast, check us out at WolverineDigest.com or Wolverine Maven, part of the Maven Network, WolverineDigest.com. Myself and Michael Spath from WTKA Ann Arbor, we keep you up to date with our commentary all week long. And one of the really cool things I love about how this site works is that the sidebar there, where we can give you, almost like a Mike Florio does at Pro Football Talk, where he can give you little mini updates via Twitter and other interactions, things that you probably want to know, be aware of, but don't require 500 to 700 word columns. I love that part of our website. It's a really easy, functional website to follow, WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we kept it simple this week. We asked you, will Michigan beat Wisconsin? And 82% of you said yes. Confidence is high, and I think it should be. I think we have the better quarterback, we have the better defense, and we're playing at home in what will be probably the most raucous atmosphere this season, except for maybe when Penn State comes in here in a few weeks. So it is lining up for Michigan to play the best game we've seen them play this year, and maybe since 2016, given how herky-jerky this past season was as well. Here's our updated Big Ten power ratings right now. We've got Ohio State, Penn State 1 and 2, Michigan rising at 3, Wisconsin at 4, but we kind of think here on Michigan Podcast there's some separation with the first 3 teams there. And then we think the next 2 teams are really tight and really close in Wisconsin and Iowa. And then we think there is a pretty big difference once you get past those 5. Maryland, Northwestern's a big riser. Purdue, Michigan State, a big faller now. Sparty with 2 losses, and the 4 toughest games on their schedule are still to come. Indiana, are they laying in wait for an ambush against Iowa? The odds makers are giving the Hoosiers some love. I mean, Iowa's is a field goal favorite in that game right now. And then you have the 4 teams at the bottom that I think are going to really struggle to win a game here down the stretch. Minnesota with all of their injuries, Illinois, Nebraska right now, ESPN's FPI has them favored only against Bethune-Cookman the rest of the way. Yikes. And then, of course, there's Rutgers. This week's question of the week, Steve, why is Rutgers in our league? I'm sorry, no, that's an evergreen. We could do that every week. This is from Jeff Van Dusen, who says, hey, your podcast seems to be all about what ifs. What if we played anybody good the last 4 weeks? Would Michigan's numbers be this good? Fool's gold. Let's have this same chat after Wisconsin and Penn State. Well, hey, first of all, why are you throwing this shade at me? I was the guy who, after the Notre Dame game, said, wait until they win a meaningful game before we get on the bandwagon, and I'm still there. Now, I think we're prepared for this, given what I've seen the last 5 weeks. I think we're ready to make that statement game win. But I agree that they still have to go out and do it. Here's what I'll say, though. The competition the last 5 weeks, is the 43rd toughest schedule in the country, guys, isn't terrible at all, especially because you're just getting into your conference season. And a lot of these leagues, Big Ten included, they're backloading a lot of their headline matchups to try to get as many teams good records and up in the rankings as they can before we get to November. And I would argue when you look at Michigan's statistical profile right now, I don't know how it could be any better against the 5 teams we played. They have done the sorts of things they were supposed to do. The numbers say they look the way they're supposed to look for this to be the team we were hoping they were going to be at the start of the year. But I do agree with the general sentiment. It now comes time for no more drop punt snaps, no more drop touchdowns and first downs at Iowa, no more Jordan Lewis doesn't get beat on a one-on-one coverage his entire 4-year career until his very last snap against Florida State in the Orange Bowl. The ways we have invented, we're sending quarterbacks to the hospital because we can't pick up free blitzers. The ways we've invented to lose the games that matter most the last few years, enough is enough. It's time to put it together for the guys in the winged helmets and to reassert why we are the winningest program in the history of the sport once more. And I think they sense that. And I think they sense it in a way that they're eager to make a statement more than they feel the pressure. But that's why they play the games. We'll find out Saturday night. I want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for supporting our efforts and telling as many people as they can about it every single week. Don't forget, get the audio version of this on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. You can follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Keep up with our work all week long at WolverineDigest.com as well. And we'll see you next week.